I am Dr. Durrell Pulley, the president of Interfaith Tampa Bay, and we welcome you to Interfaith Week. Tonight we're having a discussion on politics and faith and politics. We're here at the Lakeview Presbyterian Church in St. Petersburg, Florida, and we're grateful to have our host with us, the Circle of Faith. We're grateful for all of those who are watching. We invite you to tag someone in this post. We invite you to share this on your page because it's going to be a powerful discussion tonight about faith and politics. And it's not by any accident that we have planned this on the same night of the U.S. presidential debates. So it's an evening of fun and politics, and we invite you to give us your comments and to share your feedback. We're going to begin this evening with a moment of silence, to just take a moment to be still and to be quiet, to center yourself and to hold the image, the consciousness of peace. Hold the image and consciousness of love. Hold in your awareness the idea of unity. And hold in your mind the idea of equality. If you feel so inclined, take a deep breath to hold it and to let it go. To breathe in again, seeing a positive panel discussion this evening, an opportunity for learning and growth. And exhale. Inhale again, hold it, and let it go. Good evening again. I'm Dr. Durrell Pulley. I'm the spiritual leader of today's church, Interfaith New Thought Congregation, and Kingdom is our brand. And I'm grateful to be your host this evening for Interfaith Week, and we're talking about faith in politics. I'm graced to have such powerful spiritual leaders that are with us this evening, and I will introduce them. We have with us Reverend Phil Miller Evans, which is a Progressive Baptist, and he's representing Circle of Faith Congregation. Welcome, Reverend Phil Miller Evans. We also have with us Reverend Martha Stilson from the Church of Scientology, Tampa.
Good evening.
We are blessed to have with us this evening Imam Abdul Karim Ali. He is a Muslim, and he is with the Tampa Bay Area Muslim Association.
Thank you. Welcome.
We also have with us Father Victor Ray. He is Catholic. This is not Roman Catholic, but Siena Catholic, and he's representing the St. Teresa of Calcutta congregation.
Greetings, everyone.
And last but certainly not least, we have with us Carlos Kinsman. He is Baha'i, and he's representing the Baha'i of St. Petersburg, Florida. So we have a very diverse panel this evening representing various perspectives, and we're excited to be able to hear what those perspectives are, because that's what Interfaith Tampa Bay is all about. It's about us being safe. It's about us supporting one another, about us advocating for people who are not able to advocate for themselves, about us fellowshipping. And when it's not COVID, it's normally around a meal, and about educating one another. And tonight, it's certainly an evening of education. We're going to learn about faith and politics from the lens of all of these different perspectives. And so we're going to begin with our first question, if all of our panelists are ready. We're going to begin with our first question, and it is an education question, and that question is, what is one important thing that your faith teaches about politics? And we're going to give each panelist 2 minutes to be able to answer that question. And so we're going to start at the very end, and we're just going to go all the way around. We're going to start with Father Victor Ray with question number 1. What is one important thing that your faith teaches about politics?
I'm not so sure that our faith teaches a dogma or a canon on politics. I think our faith comes from our spiritual experience in our faith together. And I've written down a few thoughts of that. Spirituality and religious belief are central to how human beings like ourselves make sense and interpret their existence. And therefore, they are central to how human society organizes itself. And when you talk about politics, we can talk about a Catholic who was president at one time, and we're faced again with another Catholic who could possibly be president again. And the president I want to talk about is John F. Kennedy. And in 1960, he said, "Whatever issue may come before me, I will make my decision in accordance with these views, in accordance with what my conscience tells me to be the national interest, and without regard to outside religious pressures or dictates. And no power or threat of punishment could cause me to decide otherwise." What John F. Kennedy was talking about was how he would govern, how he would be president with what he has learned in the spiritual richness and his religious beliefs inside, his moral values, and how they would guide him in his presidential debate.
Thank you so much, Father Ray, for sharing your perspective. Next, we will have Carlos Kinsman.
So, the Baha'i Faith teaches basically complete non-involvement in partisan politics. One of the things is that doesn't mean that we don't vote, but what it means is that we're not going to nominate somebody. We're not going to go about and try to nominate ourselves for anything. We're not going to exalt any one person above anybody else. The reason for this being that such things can cause divisions. And so Shoghi Effendi had stated that, and he's the guardian of the Baha'i Faith, let them refrain from associating themselves, whether by word or by deed, with the political pursuits of their respective nations, with the policies of their governments, and the schemes and programs of parties and factions. In such controversies, they should assign no blame, take no side, further no design, and identify themselves with no system prejudicial to the best interests of that worldwide fellowship, which it is their aim to guard and foster. So, if we see somebody that we're going to vote for, we don't tell anybody about who we're going to vote for. We do the research ourselves, and then we go and vote. And we tell nobody about it.
Thank you very much for that perspective from the Baha'i Faith. Reverend Phil Miller Evans.
One of the basic tenets of the Baptist tradition is one of soul freedom. And so we believe very much so that each individual has the ability to interpret Scripture for themselves and to have their own values come out from their relationship with God. But we'd also turn to Scripture and we would see that Jesus was a very political person. And that when we talk about that story of Jesus and his arrest and his execution, it was done on political terms. And so the Savior that I follow speaks about the values that a good government should have. And so when we talk about and educate people, we talk about the values that we believe a good society, a good government would have. And then it is up to the individual's conscience as to whom they believe is the right person to represent those values that we have as a community talked about as being important to our faith.
Thank you so much, Reverend Phil Miller Evans. Imam Ali.
Thank you. First of all, I would like to begin by recognizing our Lord Creator with God's name, the merciful benefactor, merciful Redeemer. And I would certainly like to thank Pastor, Treasurer of Interfaith Tampa Bay, Pastor Adam Gray, moderator, and honored to be a part of the panel members here tonight for this important event. Our faith teaches us that we are obligated. It says, "Oh, you who believe, your own self obligates you, and oh, you who believe, fulfill all obligation. Fulfill all obligation." So we are not only members of the Islamic faith, but we are members of this United States of America. We have a democracy. We have a government. In order for that democracy to work for all peoples, in order for that government to work and support all people, we're obligated to give ourselves to support and praise that government if it's doing correctly. As long as the government is not stopping us from worshiping, stopping us from practicing our faith, we should obey that government and give it our support.
Thank you so much, Imam Ali. Reverend Martha Stilson, Church of Scientology.
Yes. We actually have a policy. It's in 1965 and then reissued again in 1991. L. Ron Hubbard made it an official policy of the Church of Scientology. It's called Politics, Freedom From. That the Church of Scientology is nonpartisan. It states, Scientology is for a free people and is itself on this date declared free of any political connection or allegiance of any kind whatever. Scientologists may be members of any political group on this planet without restraint. So as a body, we encompass everyone, all are welcome. Each member has their own conscience, and as they view the world and participate in the world, they may choose what other alliances they support, but that is their individual conscience.
Thank you so much, Reverend Martha Stilson. All right, so we've certainly got a varying perspective about education as it relates to what our faith teaches about politics, from being involved to not being involved. So we're grateful for those perspectives. The second question is an individual question. And the question is, how might someone from your faith tradition be motivated by their faith to participate in politics as an individual? And I believe that we've kind of touched into this a little bit, but let's get more specific. How might someone from your faith tradition be motivated by their faith to participate in politics as an individual? And we're going to start on this side with Reverend Martha Stilson from the Church of Scientology.
Thank you. We are motivated, for sure, to reach out and do for the betterment of the world. We live here, right? So we are invested in how things go. We have different perspectives of how that should be or where that came from. But as individuals, we're expected to participate. We have, one of the major tenets of one of our moral codes says support a government designed and run for all the people. So that gives you sort of our basic point of view toward freedom and responsibility. But from a Scientological point of view, responsibility always goes hand in hand with a freedom.
Thank you so much, Reverend Stilson. Imam Ali?
Yes, thank you for the question. As an individual, we all have interests, whatever that interest may be, as long as an interest is something that is good for the betterment of ourselves and the betterment of our community, etc., then you should give yourself to that interest. I, as an individual, got involved in my community some time ago to help bring the neighbors together to get acquainted with one another. And that led me to form a relationship with one of the local politicians here, the late Dr. David T. Wells, the second African American to be elected to city council. So we would form a relationship. And in that relationship, he began to share with me how the government worked. And that created a deeper interest. And in time, I decided to run for political office.
Huh?
Okay, in 1989. And also 2000. I was successful in running and being elected for many reasons. I think some people because of the name, etc. Okay, but I learned quite a bit, and I'm grateful. And because of my involvement and relationship with government, I have a pamphlet here. And this pamphlet is 2015. And it says St. Petersburg Interfaith Association, who sponsored our first Martin Luther King Interfaith Gathering in 2015 at First Mount Zion Church on 16th Street South. Okay? Now, this pamphlet was produced by our local government. okay, our local government in support of our effort. So what we are saying is, if we give ourselves in support of what is good, then that government, because our government is very resourceful, okay, and the government belongs to who? Us.
To us.
We the people. In order to form a more perfect union, we the people. Give yourself to that which belongs to you, and it will support you.
Amen.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Imam, for that perspective. Reverend Phil Miller Evans.
I think that as an individual in the Baptist tradition, our response to being in politics and how we respond to politics runs the entire gamut. Again, I think it's what our faith life and our values tell us that we need to be doing in response to community. I would start first with the idea that that we are called as Christians into bringing the kingdom of God here on earth, which means that there's a responsibility for us in the community that we have around us, and that means being involved in local politics, state politics, and national politics. And we've seen this year that we've had two state senators that have been very different in their outlook, that both claim the Baptist tradition. So Senator Grassi represents the Republican and conservative viewpoint, and then the late John Lewis was an opposite side of that Baptist tradition. So we run a wide gamut of what our response is and what we believe that we are called into responding to the political climate.
Thank you so much, Reverend Phil Miller Evans. Carlos Kinsman?
Yeah. So the bottom line is that if it's partisan, we wouldn't get involved at all. So I guess one of the ways to think about it is if there's any sort of thing that we could do, right? So government officials. So for somebody that's in power, one of the things that we actually recently did, which is of course nonpartisan, is for them to put up something that would help to alleviate the persecution that's happening for the Baha'is in Iran. They're not being allowed their education and that sort of thing, and so we try to put those sorts of things up for, onto the table, where people are suffering or something like that. Once again, the guardian of the faith, Shaghi Effendi, says, on election date, the friends must wholeheartedly participate in the elections, and in unity and amity, turning their hearts to God, detached from all things but Him, seeking His guidance and supplicating His aid and bounty. And so, basically, if there's anything that we're going to be doing, it has to be within the context of supplicating God's guidance. And that's, if you go into the idea that if the Baha'i elections were to be nominating people, then there would be a problem, because basically you think about the people in your community that you think are suited to, for example, we don't have clergy, but we have 9 members that serve on an assembly on every place. And our non-involvement in politics allows us to, for ourselves, vote for those 9 people and be completely detached. And the 9 people that get elected are those that the community at that time sees to be the most mature.
Thank you so much, Carlos Kinsman, for that perspective. Father Ray?
Well, I'd like to begin with, I came from a family of political people who ran for office and won, and I'll get to my point in a minute, but I just wanted to say the separation of church and state doesn't require the division between a belief and public action, between moral principles and public choices, but protects the right of believers and religious groups to practice their faith and act on their values in public life. I learned very early from a very good Catholic family that the fact that believers should affect the world in which we live versus isolating ourselves came from the evident in the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew 5:13 through 16. And it says, "You are the salt of the earth, but if the salt has become tasteless, how can it be made salty again? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled underfoot by men. You are the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden, nor does anyone light a lamp and put it under a basket, but on a lampstand, and it gives light to all who are in the house. Let your light shine before men in such a way that they may see your good works and glorify your Father who is in heaven." That was my motivation, and I ran for public office here in Florida a few years ago and was elected in Sumter County as the supervisor and served as a priest.
Cool.
Wow, that's amazing. That's amazing. I'm learning so much about our panelists. These are people that I interact with on a regular basis, but I'm learning much more about them and their history as it relates to faith and politics. As we move to question 3, which is a corporate question, the question is, how does your faith ideally imagine the relationship between faith and government? Again, what is the ideal? How does your faith ideally imagine the relationship between faith and government? And we're going to start with Reverend Phil Miller Evans. We're going to go this way and then come all the way back around.
Well, I think ideally we don't see that there is a separation between our faith life and our community faith life in our community and political life, because we're an integrated people, and we believe that our faith is an expression of our community and our involvement with the kingdom that is here, whether that's our U.S. democracy or another kingdom in another country. But to say that those are interrelated in terms of our whole faith understanding, and as we talk about separation of church and state, and as Father Victor has already mentioned, that's something that's so important in our Baptist life, because we start with Roger Williams and his leaving the community in Massachusetts, saying, hey, you just left the oppression of England and now you started up another church-state relationship. And so he started Rhode Island, where he said that all people would be allowed to worship as they wished. And John Leland then influences Madison and Jefferson to write that First Amendment to the Constitution. And I really want to emphasize just what Father said, was that for us that does not mean that one separates themselves from participating in the government, but that we see a very clear distinction between protecting the right of all people to worship as they want to, and also not to favor a particular religion by the government. And that, I think that really influences so deeply how we interact with our own community, with our own living together.
All right. Thank you so much, Reverend Phil Miller Evans. Imam Ali.
Yes, thank you for the question. I have to be very careful. We have to be very careful, but as an individual, when I first heard the term, church and state, my perception, before I was properly educated about that, was that they are two separate bodies, and that is incorrect. My faith, my religion of Islam, is my life. It's my life. It's not just my religion. It's not just my rituals of prayer. It's my life. So wherever I go, my life is there. My faith, my trust, my belief in the Lord Creator is there. And in state or in government locally began with the word of prayer. Pledge of Allegiance, what do we hear? One nation under who? We hold these truths to be self-evident, that we all are created by a creator. So that's telling me that I should not leave my faith at my home and expect a better result by leaving my faith. No, my faith is there. We are to be respectful of one another. The institution is to be respectful of one another. I should not impose my particular faith on the government and vice versa. But there are room for us to work together, and we should do that by all means.
Thank you so much, Imam Ali. Reverend Martha Stilson.
We have a tenet in Scientology that I think most of the world probably agrees with, but what is true for you is what you observe for yourself. So we ask, as we evolve spiritually and become more aware, that we go out and look at the world and make decisions for what is going to be the best result for the most individuals, groups, the existence of the planet, and our relationship to God. We are, therefore, if it's a question of our ideal relationship between the body of the church and the body of the state, we feel that as individuals assume responsibility and the ability to see and look, that they'll raise the responsibility and the activity level in the world, and things will improve, that governments will improve, that we'll be able to have a saner and more peaceful existence. But there is an interrelationship between individuals and governments, and we hope to better the individuals so that they can then better the government for all of us.
Thank you so much, Reverend Stilson. Yes, Father Ray.
Yes. Religious freedom can't be reduced to simply the right to participate in certain activities on Friday night and Saturday night if you're Jewish, Saturday night or Sunday if you're Christian, or Friday if you're a Muslim. There's a public meaning to religious freedom, and that is what is often contested today. And I said this is actually a reflection of the Lord's teaching to render unto Caesar what is Caesar's, and what is God's unto God. If there are things that are of God, that means there are some things that are not of Caesar. And that means Caesar is limited. And since the founders and the framers of our country very much believed in a limited state, they saw the protection of religious freedom as an essential part of putting barriers around the tendency of the modern state to occupy all space in society. The notion of religious freedom, the protection of religious conscience, goes straight back to the New Testament and to the Lord's teaching that there are some things that are Caesar's and that there are some things that are God's, and what is God's does not belong to Caesar, and Caesar is limited. Caesar, to be just, must recognize the things of God. And so that's how I see in the corporate that religion is a fabric woven into our government itself. It can't be separated because, as Imam Ali said, we, the people, participate.
Thank you so much, Father Ray. Carlos Kinsman.
So, with the Baha'i Faith, one of the things that you think about is community, individual, and the institution, and the relationship between them. And so, in other words, what I mean by that is that an individual has a membership within a community, and then a community within an institution, and the institution has to be in tune with the community and the individual in order for it to move forward with things. So for one thing that the Baha'is do, for example, is junior youth empowerment. It's one of our core activities at this present time. And what happens with these is we'll go and we'll do these weekly consistent meetings with these junior youth that help them to grow. Then what will happen is we'll talk to one another. We'll talk to the other Baha'is. How is this going? What's working? What's not working? And that's a community aspect. And then we go and we see if the institution has some resources that we can use. You know, maybe they know people. Maybe they know this artist that can help get the kids engaged in artistry, like, you know, playing the drums, singing. That's sort of what I gravitate to. But you see that basically we'll go and do something and we'll come back and reflect on that one thing and make changes and go back and forth through that. In regards to government, that's how, you know, ideally we would try to, talk with one another. But in the Universal House of Justice says that the laws revealed by Baha'u'llah in the Aqdas, whenever practicable and not in direct conflict with the civil law of the land, absolutely binding on every believer on the Baha'i institution, whether in the East or in the West. I feel like my thoughts are somewhat non-coherent. But what this is saying is that our relationship with the government, with the institutions, it's very important to follow their laws as long as they're not within, you know, going directly against what we as Baha'is believe.
Thank you so much, Carlos Kinsman. The fourth question is an interfaith question, and it asks about the First Amendment. The question is, how does your faith ask you to respond to people of other faiths? These are people who do not believe the same as you believe, who do not practice the same spiritual, religious practices as you, or may have freedom from religion overall. How does your faith ask you to respond to people of other religions? And we're going to start with Carlos Kinsman.
So Baha'u'llah says, consort with the followers of all religions in a spirit of friendliness and fellowship. I think that's also in the Baha'i temple in Wilmette, where it says to do something similar. I can't remember where it is, but it's on the inside. And this is very much an incredibly important thing for us, because if we're responding to people of other faiths, we have to act courteously with them. We have to, we can't, if they're not seeing something our way, we can't start an argument about it. And you know, we can learn from each other, because if you think about it, like, everybody has had their own experience. I was a Christian for 7 years, and what had happened was I was not receptive to the Baha'i religion when I was very much into my faith. And so what I noticed and started to notice was that I was being told this one thing about Muslims, and then over here I was interacting with Muslims, and they were incredibly courteous, incredibly kind, incredibly good people. And I started to wonder if such a faith could actually not be of God. And eventually, I stopped putting myself in a box that I had to listen to only what other people were saying, and I started to do my own research, and eventually came to the conclusion. It doesn't mean that I'm not still seeking for God. You always have to do such things, but you're always in the readings and such. But I think that the courtesy that the Muslims and Baha'is showed me during that time helped me to realize that these things all came from God, and there's no division in that.
Thank you. So what I hear you saying, Carlos, is that the Baha'i faith's position as it relates to interfaith is to be friendly and to have fellowship with people of different faith traditions.
Yes.
All right, thank you very much. Father Victor Ray.
My answer is very short. The Jewish scriptures, the Christian scriptures, the Quran sum it all up. We are created in the image and likeness of God. Love your neighbor as yourself. That's the general rule.
So what I hear you saying is that love is the word that governs your interaction with people of different faith traditions.
Exactly. We're all the same. We have different flavors to our Creator, but we're all one.
Thank you very much. Reverend Martha Stilson.
In the Church of Scientology, we welcome everyone from whatever faith. You're welcome to keep your faith as you take the spiritual path that is Scientology. We hope your experience deepens and that you become more aware of your relationship with God, the Creator, and of yourself as a spiritual being and what your true capabilities are. We are all created in the image of the Creator, which means we have those likenesses in the ability to create and perceive and be in brotherhood with one another. It is so as all political points of view are welcome within the church, all religious points of view are welcome within the church.
Okay. Can you say a little bit more about how you can be a Scientologist and keep your faith from another religion?
Yes. Scientology is based on the fact that each individual is a spiritual being. You have a body, you have a mind, and you as a being have the right to be in control of both your body and your mind. So this is an applied religious philosophy. There are steps to take. It's not really meditation, it's more specific and organized. But the initial book wasn't even meant to be about religion. The Dianetics, the Modern Science of Mental Health. It's a way an individual can become more at cause over those things which seem to ambush him emotionally and mentally. It just became necessary to become a religion because it is the spirit, you as a being, who is running the mind. So without address to who you really are, there's no point, right? So that's how we started and how we grew, and what caused it to become a religion is that there's just no other way around it. You are a spiritual being. That in and of itself does not negate any belief. My husband, as a Scientology minister, performed the Scientology part of a funeral ceremony alongside a rabbi for a friend of ours who was both Jewish and Scientologist. It is, I don't know, what is true for you is what you observe for yourself. You do not set aside your beliefs or what you've found to be true when you enter our doors. We just hope it becomes deeper for you.
Okay. So what I hear you saying is that in Scientology, that a person's religion or what they find true for themselves can work in tandem with them being a Scientologist, and the idea is that they just become deeper in whatever they have observed to be true for themselves.
Exactly.
All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Imam Ali.
Yeah. Yes, again, thank you for the question. I, in the coming of Muhammad the Prophet, peace be upon him, and when he was sent to the world by our Creator, he came with a book. The book is called the Quran, okay? And it said, he said to the people, he said, we are all are peoples of the book. We all are peoples of the book. Now, when I look at that, in my faith, the book, the Quran, and the Christian faith, the Injil or the Bible, and the Jewish faith, the Torah, but it says we all are peoples of the book. Now, how does that bring about a togetherness with those who don't associate themselves with any faith? But they all are peoples of the book. What book? The creation itself is nothing but one giant book. And we all benefit from that book. Okay? Regardless of our belief or what have you, we all benefit from that book. And when we understand that and appreciate that, and those of us of faith, we give praise and thanks to the Almighty who brought about that book. Not for his purpose, but for our purpose. And we are better off when we understand and give ourselves to that.
So what I hear you saying, Imam, is that from the Islamic perspective, is that we all are people of the book,
Yes,
and
sir.
the book is the book of creation.
Right.
Because we're all created, that we all are one, regardless of our different beliefs.
That's correct.
All right. Thank you so much.
No, no, no.
All right. Reverend Phil Miller Evans.
So we've all kind of said the same thing here in the sense that all of our scriptures, religious readings point us to the fact that we are all equal under God in the ways that we understand God. So I want to go back to talking just specifically, not so much about the scripture that we hold, but to talk about what it means for me to be a Baptist. And I say that because at this point, I have become uncomfortable because the country and the world often sees Baptists as being divisive, as being the ones who condemn others, who speak about other religions as being false religions. And those Baptists that are named do not represent the kind of Baptist that I am. And that comes again from some of those fundamentals of the Baptist tradition. So we are under local church autonomy, which means we don't have bishops, we don't have cardinals, we don't have popes, we don't have others above the local church, and the members there are the ones who really speak the truth of the faith. And then we join together in associations with one another. And so, again, the whole premise of the beginnings of Baptists was out of oppression by church states, and that they were the ones who said that we need to everyone to worship as they believe. And that means sometimes we have to protect the rights of people who worship in a way that seem very contrary to us. So we have a group in Washington called the Baptist Joint Committee for Religious Freedom, and they've been around to watchdog the First Amendment to make sure that the Supreme Court is acting appropriately in that. Our legislation is doing that. And I remember as a young person that group came under great controversy because they supported Reverend Sung Myung Moon, who was being attacked by the government, and the church was trying to be stripped of its tax-exempt position. And that in that time, Reverend Sung Myung Moon and his church was one that was under great disrepute in this country. But we said, hey, if it's to protect my worship, then I also have to protect his worship.
Truth.
And so, to me, interfaith is at the very center of my Baptist belief, and it is with that kind of pride that I've been involved with Tampa Bay Interfaith for many, many years, and continue to do that work. And my ethics professor, Snuffy Smith, was also the ethics professor of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.
Yeah, I've heard that,
And
yeah.
Dr. King reached out beyond Baptist lines, and he invited people of all sorts of different backgrounds to join in that fight for what was a rights of human beings.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't the rights of Baptists, it wasn't the rights of Jews, it wasn't the rights of Islam, it wasn't the right of Baha'i, it was the human rights that we all should be lifting up. And so
Absolutely.
therefore I just don't see that we can be anything but respectful of one another even as we practice differences in our expression of religion.
Beautiful.
Right. What I heard you saying, Reverend Phil Miller Evans, is that from your perspective as a progressive Baptist, is that as it relates to other faiths, you are protecting the rights of people to worship as they desire, and that encompasses you also protecting your own right to worship as you desire. That if you do not respect the right for other people to worship as they desire, then you put in jeopardy your right to worship as you desire. All right, I think we all got some consensus here. I hope I've summarized for you what the different perspectives were as it relates to interfaith and the First Amendment question. Our final question of the evening is a truth and power question, and the question is, when the government does or proposes things that your faith considers to be wrong, or some people don't like the word wrong, so not the highest and the best for all parties concerned, or the way that you talk about wrong in your tradition, what resources does your faith give you to respond? So when the government makes a law or does something that you or your faith might be in contradiction with, how does your faith to respond to that difference between what the government has said and what your faith has said? And we're going to start. Have you started a question? You did start a question. You started a question. Imam, all right, you're going to start this question for us. And thank y'all for helping me keep tally. I'm trying to keep it all where everybody gets equal first and last and rights. Right, so we're going to start with Imam Ali.
Yeah. Again, thank you for the question. In my faith, it says very clearly, stand up for injustice, even if it's against yourself. Stand up for injustice. You stand for something. Stand up for injustice, even if it's against yourself.
Are you saying stand up for justice or stand up for injustice?
Stand up for injustice,
Okay.
even if it's against yourself,
Stand again.
even if it's against your loved one. We are in a time where us of our government is not right. So we shouldn't turn a deaf ear. We shouldn't turn away. No, we should stand up. Because if we want to have this perfect union, we the people must make that happen. So make a stand. And as we are speaking, citizens throughout this great country is going to the voting poll and making a decision on who they are impressed with, who they're in support of, and who they're opposed to. That's a stand. Okay? So we have to be part of that. Don't sit back and wait to someone else. We certainly shouldn't sit back and wait to E.T. and his kinfolk from another planet to come to do that. That's our obligation. So we are obligated to make that stand. Stand up for injustice. And when we see that which is right, support that and acknowledge that. That which is not right, stand up against that.
All right. So you're saying stand up against injustice and
Injustice.
support that which is right. All right. So let me ask you a question. So, like, when the government made same-gender marriage equality for all people, and I don't believe that that's in alignment with the Muslim tradition.
Right.
How does your faith inform you to respond to that?
Well, my faith teaches me that relationship does matter. However, our government have made a decision. I can differ with that, but I can respect that. Okay?
Great response. I appreciate that. So even though I don't agree, I respect it.
There you
Because
go.
the government has made that decision.
Yeah.
All right, Reverend Martha Stilson.
I love this question. First, I want to say we have a long history for us, because we've only been here since 1950, of standing up for human rights. We have a foundation that Scientologists as individuals support, through our International Association of Scientologists that is supports the education in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. If people know what their rights are, they are way less likely to allow those rights to be abridged. And that education undercuts pretty much any kind of discrimination based on prejudice or lack of knowledge, because we all are human and we all have basic essential rights. There are 30 of them. And we kind of make that a campaign. And I have to say, when the government tries to enforce things that are directly against one of our most important tenets, which is that as a spiritual being, you have the right to autonomy over your body and mind. So we feel that, for the most part, psychiatry is a negative influence in society. We don't consider that actually they promote mental health to a large degree, especially the Baker Act in Florida, which means that your children can be taken and, well, incarcerated, but institutionalized without the permission of a parent. Or your elderly, like somebody, my husband had a seizure disorder and sometimes could seem, well, he was totally out of it, but he was not insane. It was a physical condition. So we have a group called Citizens Commission on Human Rights that directly stands up for people and individuals so that their rights are not abridged by the government in this way. So we also stood with Sun Myung Moon and in the fight for recognition of the church. We're active, but not in partisan ways. We're active in ways that if it abridges somebody's spiritual freedoms, their personal integrity and their right to act as individuals.
All right. So what I hear you saying is that if there's an instance where a person's human rights or religious freedom is infringed on by the government, that your faith through the Bill of Human Rights gives you the resources to stand up against that and fight for that person's right to function as an individual.
And the responsibility.
Thank you. Thank you so much. All right. Let's go to Father Victor Ray.
Well, this is a question that I probably will get a little bit animated on and very excited about, because there are things in this government that legislate things which I would call, and I'm going to approach the term pro-life versus pro-choice. And that's what I want to talk about tonight in my presentation here. And I'm trying not to get political by using the names of the characters that are involved, because I realize there's a debate after this, and I think I could debate them probably a little bit better than they're going to debate themselves. But in this country today, at least for us Catholics, pro-life has been the end-all in our decisions. You've probably seen on Facebook, you've probably heard, the Catholic Church says that we need to vote for pro-life no matter what. And the only pro-life candidate there is number 45, who is pronouncing pro-life. So that means everything else beyond who is running doesn't matter. So we don't look at racial injustice. We don't look at position on health care. We don't look at what's involved in the environment. We don't look on taxation. We don't even look at immigration reform. It has become a one issue. And it's wrong. And we need to stand against it. You know, we have a president today who likes to push the envelope, likes to push people's buttons. Not even sure if he knows what button he's pushing, but if he can get a button and he gets tweets, that's the most important thing. He has forgotten what life is about. He is focused so much on getting reelected that he's been pushing the envelope for the protection of the unborn. But I want you to know that is a point that I don't think we in our faith can only be a single issue voter on. We need to look at the whole picture. Let us consider the events that just unleashed the murder of George Floyd. This was not an isolated crime of a single rogue police officer, but rather a crime that symbolizes the vast pattern of crimes committed against black men and women. This dreadful crime, as it seems to many of us, of a piece with other crimes against black people that occurred around the same time. Crimes such as the murder of Ahmaud Arbery, a black man jogging in a white neighborhood in Georgia, and a piece with the lynchings of black men and women in the early 20th century. It belongs to the moral fallout of slavery and reminds us of how much healing has to take place between black and white Americans. For number 45, the George Floyds of America are invisible. Look at the 4th of July speech he just gave at Mount Rushmore, in which he surveys U.S. history down to the present and addresses the burning concerns of today. He does not even mention George Floyd and his aggrieved fellow black people that do not even exist for him. He just speaks about the statues that were being taken down this summer and declares his support for the police. He cannot hear the cry for justice that resounds throughout the world in the wake of the brutal murder of Mr. Floyd. And in the protests, he can only discern that lawlessness and rioting. He wants us to feel threatened by the protesters, not to be morally challenged by them. He has nothing more to say to us than to tweet in all caps, "Law and order." He thinks he has nothing more than to call in the dogs and issue threats. Trump is pro-life, and that is far more important than he is weak on race relations, right? To which the obvious answer is that the murder of George Floyd and Ahmaud Arbery is no less a murder than the murder of unborn babies. But more than that, these racial murders, as I said, represent generations of violence perpetuated against our black brothers and sisters. And this violence should burden pro-life conscious as much as abortion does, but it doesn't seem to burden number 45. Finally, I'd just like to say number 45 rarely appeals to the better angels of our nature, but almost always appeals to the darker demons. When has he ever appealed to the noble ideas on which this U.S. is founded? When did he ever wax elegant on the proposition that all men are created equal? When did he deplore the fact that we often fall short of our founding ideals? And when did he ever call us to repentance for our national sins, as President Lincoln did in 1863? No. All I say to you is this, and this is the way I feel. Beware of being fixed on life issues, that you accept too much collateral damage in our institutions and our traditions, disrupting the rule of law in our body of politics, or lending support to a malignant racism, or disseminating the position of amorality are not secondary issues about which good people can disagree, but are as important as any of the issues that we take into our electoral deliberations. We need to think with our hearts and with our minds and with our souls for our fellow Americans.
Wow,
and that's
that
what our
very
teaching-
powerful. Thank you so much, Father Victor Ray. So what I heard you saying,
Yeah, I'm sorry not to be so political. I'm sorry.
what I heard you saying is that from your faith tradition and from your perspective, is that we need to broaden to look at all the issues and not just focus
Right.
on one particular issue.
Exactly.
All
We
right.
need to focus ourselves. I'm pro-life, and and what we're focusing on, and other people are looking as anti-abortion. abortion. I don't like abortion. But abortion is a moral thing, and we cannot legislate morality. We need to teach. If we churches come together, us faith communities come together, and we don't believe that it is right, then we need to teach our people, and we need to be loving people. And we need to know that pro-life is much more than just anti-abortion. Pro-life is rescuing those children and those immigrants at our borders. Pro-life is about the child that once is born, we complain that we have to give food stamps to. Pro-life is talking about embracing the whole world together. It's more than anti-abortion.
Thank you so much. All right, Reverend Phil Miller Evans.
I think from an interfaith position, we've heard at least three different perspectives on specific values that we feel strongly about. And I think we should, as individuals and as people of faith, to do that. But Father Victor and I can have another conversation in another time about whether I fit with what he says or with Imam. In terms of where my particular specific political values are. But if we come together in interfaith, and this is my point here, is that we individually need to do those things that we feel our conscience and our God calls us to do, but together we work for those things that are in common, that we can all agree upon, advance our culture, advance our community, advance our government. And sometimes that's going to put us at odds.
Mm-hmm.
But we also all know that almost every religion has had its time when it has been the oppressor, and we need to take responsibility for those times in our history that we have done that, and we need to be on the side of justice and peace and righteousness and find those places together that we can work in common on. And issue politics, because much more important than that one little thing that has held us. And those of you who know me are going to know for certain that from a social political standpoint, I am far, far left. But religiously, I call myself an evangelical, which oftentimes suggests conservatism to another set of us. So I think that it's that balance of working together for that common good is what we really need to be working on as an interfaith community of people of faith together.
And so what I hear you saying is that the resources that your faith gives you to respond when the government is wrong or not doing what's right is to find the common ground that can benefit all of us as opposed to focusing on one issue.
So one of my mentors that worked on Capitol Hill talks about how 25 years ago, 30 years ago, that it was common for Republicans and Democrats to stand in Congress and fight vehemently on the floor in opposite positions, and then they'd all go out to have cocktails and dinner together. And he said about 25 years ago that stopped happening. That's something that we as people of faith ought to change about this country, is that kind of partisanism.
Okay, thank you very much. And the last word on the last question will come from Carlos Kinsman.
So Baha'is believe in basically no form of prejudice to be, to be enacted. It's all evil. We believe that upon conception, the soul is created, but we view all of these things not in a vacuum, but in their totality, and we realize that the source of those things is this idea that you're different from me. And so the tools that we have to combat this sort of thing are for anything regarding what the government might say is, against our faith, is in fact the writings. There is an answer basically to everything. Not even 10% of the writings of Baha'u'llah, of the Bab, of Abdul Baha and Ashoghi Effendi have been translated into English, and yet I haven't even scratched the surface of that. And I have found invariably that addressed in those writings are these ideas of prejudice today. The Baha'is believe that every manifestation of God, Jesus, Muhammad, came to a place and a time and gave a message for those people. And if you see it within that context, you'll see that it's a progressive thing, that it's helping humanity grow morally with knowledge. We separate this idea of science and religion, but they have to go hand in hand. Would you be able to have certain devotions that you have without Zoom, for example? And so I say to the question of this, it's something that the government doesn't believe in, you have to go, or that the Baha'is believe is wrong, you have to go against it. Example, there were times that if you said you were a Baha'i, and there are still times there, that you would be killed. If you are Baha'i and you profess not to be a Baha'i, then you have gone against your faith. Whether the alternative would have been your death. And so, I guess the biggest tool is what Baha'u'llah wrote, what the Bab wrote. And the idea of that is that, again, going back to this community, individual, and institution, is as an individual, you try to search for that for yourself in whatever religion or within science or whatever it is that you see. Within the community, you look for communities that see that these prejudices are evil. And for the institution, you would try to help them see ways that would take action against those evils.
Thank you very much. What I hear you saying is that through the writings of your founder, you're giving resources to help the individual, the community, and the institution to be able to have equality and justice for all.
Yes.
All right. Thank you very much. Well, thank you all for being a part of this wonderful panel. I won't call it a debate, but we shared our various perspectives. We got into some very touchy subjects and issues, and we're grateful that you were a part of it. Again, we invite you to tag someone in this post, to share this on your page, to go back and start a watch party. And if you missed any part of this conversation this evening, thank you so much for being a part of Interfaith Week. We will close out our activities on Saturday evening at 6 o'clock p.m., where we will have meditation, spiritual exercise from various faith traditions. We invite you, if you're not already a member of Interfaith Tampa Bay, to join us, to go to our website, interfaithtampabay.com, to find out more information about Interfaith. We invite you every third Thursday to the Interfaith meetings, currently being held on Zoom every third Thursday at 9 o'clock a.m. Again, I'm your host, Dr. Dewar Pulley, the president of Interfaith Tampa Bay. We're grateful for all of our panelists. Thank you, Reverend Martha Stilson. Thank you, Imam Ali. Thank you, Reverend Phil Miller-Evans. Thank you so much, Carlos Kinsman. And thank you so much, Father Victor Ray, for giving us your perspective. I believe that I've learned something different about each one of your faith traditions that I did not walk in here knowing this evening. And I hope that you've learned and gained things as well. We're going to thank you again. Thank you so much for Circle of Faith hosting us this evening and allowing us to have these wonderful mics and this wonderful air-conditioned space and these cameras and all that it takes to provide what it is that we're experiencing today. We're grateful, so grateful for Pastor Adam Gray and for his staff and allowing us to be here this evening. Again, thank you so much for being a part of our faith and politics discussion. And we're going to end as we began with a moment of silence. We've heard a lot. We've seen a lot. We've felt a lot. We've shared a lot. Let's just take a moment to take it all in. I invite you, if you so desire, to just take a deep breath, hold it, and release. What have you learned tonight? How have you grown? How have you been empowered? Breathe in again, hold it if you so desire, and let it go. How have you been inspired this evening? How will you allow faith, your faith, to inform your politics? Breathe in one more time. If you so desire, hold it and slowly let it go. And so we take a moment of silence for love, joy, peace, justice, and equality for all. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful evening.